Hey everyone, I've been sitting on this for a while, but I think it's finally time to get it off my chest. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy posting about relationship drama on Reddit, but here we are. So, a little context. I've been with my girlfriend, let's call her Emily, for about 3 years. Things were good, mostly. We laughed, we traveled a bit, and I thought we had a future. I wasn't blind to some small signs, like how she'd sometimes get distant for days or seem secretive with her phone. But I brushed them off, you know? I wanted to trust her. It wasn't until one evening, after a long day at work, that I started noticing the cracks. She came home late, acting unusually cheerful, texting someone behind her back, and then quickly locking her phone when I walked into the room. My stomach sank, but I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. That night, though, something just clicked. I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me already knew. The next few days were a blur. Every little thing she did felt suspicious. I found myself rereading old texts she accidentally left open, replaying conversations in my head, and overanalyzing every smile or shrug. I felt like my own brain had turned against me. The shock hit hard, like a punch to the gut that just wouldn't quit. I remember sitting on the edge of our couch one night, staring at her, heart racing, wondering if I should confront her. Part of me wanted answers immediately. Another part wanted to run away and hide from the truth. And then the first real confirmation came. Not from a confession, not from catching her in the act, but from a friend who casually mentioned seeing her with someone else. My stomach dropped. That's when anger hit. Full-blown, blinding anger. I wanted to scream, throw things, make her feel the same betrayal I was feeling, but I just sat there, trembling, feeling like my world had quietly split in half, and I was standing on the edge. After the initial shock and anger wore off, it was like a heavy fog settled over me. I couldn't eat properly, sleep was impossible, and every song, every joke, even the smell of her perfume, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I kept replaying the what-ifs over and over. What if I hadn't been so trusting? What if I had noticed sooner? What if this wasn't real? It wasn't just sadness. It was betrayal wrapped in disbelief. I caught myself staring at her, searching for any hint of guilt or remorse. Sometimes she looked at me with that soft smile I loved, and it made the pain even worse because I realized she had been capable of keeping a life, our memories, divided in half without me noticing. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, questioning everything about myself. I wanted to scream at the universe, why me? But there was no one to answer, just me and the echo of a life I thought I knew. After days of silent suffering, I realized I couldn't just sit there anymore. Something had to give. I kept asking myself, do I confront her? Do I leave? Or do I try to fix this? Each option felt like stepping into a different kind of hell. Confronting her might shatter whatever remained of our bond. Leaving felt like admitting defeat. And trying to fix it, well, that felt impossible when trust had been shredded. I started small, just observing her, looking for patterns, trying to see if there was any genuine remorse. Every text, every laugh, every touch became a test I didn't want to take. And the hardest part? I still cared about her. More than I should have. I wanted her to explain, to make it all better with some magical confession, but deep down I knew that wasn't coming. By the end of the week, I realized something important. I couldn't make my decision based on anger or sadness. I had to figure out what I wanted my life to look like, with or without her. That clarity, terrifying as it was, became the first step toward moving forward. I finally decided I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. One evening, I told her we needed to talk, really talk. My hands were shaking, my voice barely steady, but I forced myself to sit her down and ask the questions that had been eating at me. At first, she tried to dodge, giving vague answers and small half-smiles, but I pressed on. And then it all came out. Not in one clean confession, but in fragments. Little lies piled on top of each other until the truth spilled out like water through a broken dam. She had been seeing someone else for months, someone she claimed just happened, but the way she avoided my eyes made it clear this wasn't an accident. I felt a mix of relief and devastation. Relief, because I finally knew. devastation, because everything I thought was real had been a lie. I wanted to cry, scream, throw things, but instead, I just sat there, stunned, listening to her explanations that felt hollow and rehearsed. After the confrontation, the world felt strangely quiet, like the noise of everyday life had been turned down. I couldn't cry properly, couldn't yell, couldn't even get angry anymore. The anger I had felt before seemed small compared to the numbness settling in. It was like walking through a fog where every familiar corner of my life had changed overnight. I replayed the confrontation again and again in my mind. Her words, her excuses, the way she avoided my gaze, they all burned into my memory. I realized that the betrayal wasn't just about the other person. It was about losing someone I trusted completely. I kept asking myself why it happened, trying to find some logic, some reason, but there wasn't one that made sense. Sleep was still impossible, and even when I tried to distract myself with work or friends, a shadow followed me everywhere. I felt small, fragile, and completely unprepared for the emotional storm I had stepped into. After a week of wandering through that fog, I realized I couldn't just survive this. I had to figure out what I actually wanted. Not what she wanted, not what anyone else expected, but me. I started asking myself hard questions. Do I want to stay in this relationship knowing what I know? Can I ever trust her again? More importantly, who am I if I let this define me? I spent hours alone, walking through the city streets, just thinking. Every familiar place reminded me of moments we had shared, and every memory felt both precious and poisonous at the same time. I started writing things down, my feelings, my fears, my anger. Somehow, putting words to it made the chaos a little more manageable. It was during one of these walks that I had a strange realization. Fear had been my silent companion all along. Fear of confrontation, fear of losing her, fear of being alone. And maybe, I thought, it was time to stop letting fear shape my life. That idea scared me more than anything else, but also felt like a spark, a small hope I hadn't felt in weeks. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me, or let fear dictate my next move. I told her I needed space, real space, and that I would be thinking hard about whether this relationship had a future. She nodded, looking guilty but resigned, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and heaviness. I started small. I changed my routine, went back to the gym, reconnected with friends I had neglected, and even picked up hobbies I had abandoned. Every little step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. It wasn't easy. Some days I'd spiral back into anger or sadness, but slowly, I realized that being proactive, rather than reactive, gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. I also began setting boundaries, mentally and emotionally. I stopped checking her phone, stopped obsessing over who she was talking to, and instead focused on my own growth. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was steering my own life again, even if the waters were rough. As the days turned into weeks, I started noticing changes in myself I hadn't expected. I laughed more easily, I slept a little better, and I began feeling pride in small accomplishments, like finishing a project at work or just sticking to a morning run. It wasn't about her anymore, it was about me. The surprise was how empowering it felt. Betrayal had knocked me down, but it also forced me to confront parts of myself I'd ignored. My fear of being alone, my tendency to avoid difficult conversations, my reliance on someone else for happiness. Facing those weaknesses was painful, but it also gave me a sense of clarity. I realized I didn't need anyone else to validate me or define my worth. There were moments, of course, when I'd see her across the street or hear about her life through mutual friends, and a pang of sadness would hit. But now, instead of sinking into despair, I acknowledged it, let it pass, and reminded myself that I was building something stronger, myself. By this point, I knew I had to think bigger. It wasn't just about surviving the breakup or getting over betrayal. It was about reshaping my life on my own terms. I started setting goals I had neglected, travel I'd postponed, career moves I'd been too cautious to pursue, even classes I'd wanted to take, but never had the courage to start. It was strange at first, because every plan I made felt like a rebellion against the version of myself that had relied so heavily on her. But that rebellion became exciting. I realized I didn't need anyone else's approval to chase what I wanted, and the thought was liberating. I even started saying yes to things I would have avoided before: networking events, new hobbies, social meetups. Fear had controlled me for too long, but now I wanted to see how far I could go if I just stopped being shy, stopped worrying about judgment, and leaned into life fully. As I started putting myself out there more, I was surprised by the support I received. Friends I hadn't talked to in months reached out, offering advice, distraction, or just a shoulder to lean on. Some of them shared their own stories of betrayal and heartbreak, and hearing their experiences made me feel less alone and more resilient. Even strangers played a role. I joined a few social and professional events I would have normally avoided, and small conversations turned into connections that felt genuine. Every smile, every shared laugh, every bit of encouragement reminded me that the world wasn't entirely defined by one person's betrayal. That support made me realize something crucial. Moving forward wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about surrounding myself with people and experiences that nurtured growth and courage. And slowly, the fog of sadness started to lift. Just when I thought I was finding my footing, life threw me a curveball. I ran into her at a cafe, laughing with someone new, looking completely at ease. My first instinct was to bolt, to hide, to sink back into the old panic and anger. But something inside me had changed. Instead of reacting, I took a deep breath and watched from a distance. I let the emotions rise and fall without letting them control me. The sadness stung, sure, but it no longer felt like the end of the world. In that moment, I realized I was stronger than I thought. I could face her existence in my life without collapsing, without letting fear and betrayal dictate my emotions. That encounter was like a final exam in emotional resilience. And for the first time in months, I felt confident that I could pass. After that cafe encounter, I made a conscious decision. I wasn't going to let her betrayal define the next chapter of my life. I started saying yes to things I had been hesitant about: career opportunities that scared me, travel adventures that pushed my comfort zone, even social situations I would have avoided before. The difference was striking. I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. I realized that fear, the fear of being alone, of failure, of judgment, had been my true cage. By stepping out of it, I was finally able to shape my life on my own terms. Even more surprising was how empowering it felt to trust myself again. I didn't need her, I didn't need validation, and I didn't need someone else to tell me I was worth it. I finally understood that the power to move forward had been inside me all along. I just had to stop being shy and take the first step. Looking back, I realize how much this experience changed me. Betrayal forced me to confront my deepest fears, but it also taught me resilience, self-worth, and the power of taking control of my own life. I learned that it's okay to feel anger, sadness, and disappointment, but it's even more important to channel those emotions into growth. I also discovered the value of honesty, not just with others, but with myself. I had to admit my own fears, weaknesses, and patterns before I could truly move forward. And surprisingly, that admission became the key to freedom. If there's one thing I tell anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't shy away from the hard moments. Face them, learn from them, and let them push you to become stronger. Life isn't defined by betrayal. It's defined by how you rise after it. Now, months later, I can honestly say I feel lighter, stronger, and more in control of my life than I have in years. The relationship is over, and though part of me still carries the sting of betrayal, that pain no longer dictates my days. I've started new projects, made new connections, and even allowed myself to imagine a future unbound by fear or doubt. The biggest surprise? I realized that being shy or fearful had kept me from living fully for years. Once I decided to face the fear of loss, of confrontation, of failure, I discovered that life could be richer, fuller, and more surprising than I had imagined. So here's my advice. Don't be afraid to confront what scares you. Don't let betrayal define your worth, and don't shy away from the life you want. Fear is natural, but courage, real courage, comes from moving forward anyway. Life isn't perfect, but it's yours to shape, and every step you take toward it counts.